Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wasatch Report. My name is Suzanne Sherman. I will be your host for the next hour here on the Cerberus Radio Network. Redefend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. I am looking out my window right now in the hinterlands of Utah, and it looks like a snow globe out here. Supposed to be, let's see, 3/7/2017, March 7th. Year of our Lord 2019. I don't know why I put a 7 there. This is what happens when we do these early morning shows. Jeff Johnson's joining me in the studio today. Let's see. A lot going on here. We've got about 3 hours worth of material. We're going to try and get by in an hour. Hopefully, Ben McClintock's going to be joining us from Defending Utah with some insight into thought crime here in the state of Utah. I want to remind you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We have a fan page, CRN. Want to thank our new followers on SoundCloud. Jeff, I know you put up a request yesterday for our followers of the Facebook page to please join us over on SoundCloud, because a lot of people can't listen live, and all of the episodes are up there. We also broadcast live on YouTube and Radio Co. If you're listening on YouTube, you can join our live chat. You can also send me messages on Facebook and private messenger, Suzanne Sherman, and I will respond to them verbally. I will announce your messages on the air. I will protect your privacy, but I can't respond to them in writing because I'm still doing hard time in the Facebook correctional facility. Also, all of my articles, as well as, Jeff, I did this yesterday. I'm using my time in solitary confinement well, and I learned yesterday how to link our social media. So we have the CRN network as for YouTube on the new page, SuzanneCSherman.com. And I also have my social media, my Facebook and Twitter accounts up there. We do have a Cerberus Media website in the works. So all of this is going to be linked together. And I think it's going to be a very robust program platform for us. Again, we're not abandoning Facebook. We know so many people are so entrenched. Facebook is entrenched in our lives, good or bad. It is what it is. So I will keep a presence up as much as I can. I anticipate that at some point they're going to just shut my account down. I think someone has it out for me there. I have shared a story before of a little social justice warrior who was a neighbor of ours when we lived in Palo Alto, California. And she was an HR employee for a big tech company. And she was the first hurdle for job applicants to cross. And she would look through the resumes. And this is why I would never put anything personal on a resume. But some people, places ask for it. Some people volunteer it. Anybody that admitted they were hunters as their hobby, she would throw that resume right in the trash. So her employer, because of her personal disdain for illegal activity, was denied the opportunity to seek out talent purely per her discretion. For those that have seen my page, I have hunting pictures. I have a picture of me holding a coyote I shot by my neighbor's home. I think they might have seen that, but here's what's interesting. I just came across an article today, and we're going to not get into this too much. We're going to wait until Junk Bond gets back. He joined us yesterday, by the way. We discussed some cybersecurity and some Facebook issues, as well as YouTube and other issues as well. So you can check out yesterday's show. It is up on SoundCloud now. Thank you very much, Jeff. But here's an article that I saw from the Washington Post. And I know Junk Bond would be laughing as I read this. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg says he'll reorient the company towards encryption and privacy. The firm's focus is going to shift from a social network in which people broadcast information to large groups to one of people in which they communicate with smaller groups and their content disappears after a short period. Jeff, are you buying any of that garbage?
No.
No. It's like I asked Greg, well, so, I just post my stuff to friends only, or at least I used to before I got into radio. He goes, yes, it's friends and CIA. Facebook, going back to the article, for which a generation has encouraged billions of people to widely share their life's updates and pictures, is trying to reinvent itself as a place for private communication. I thought it was. Now this is what's funny. They say this stuff is going to disappear when we were all under the impression that we had private groups or chats or comments that were going to friends only. And we were kind of under the impression, maybe naive people like me, that it was going away. I'm getting banned immediately now, back to back, consecutive, actually concurrent bans. I was 14 days remaining in my final one. But since I did a couple of shows on Facebook and cybersecurity, cultural Marxism and identity Stalinism, they've been hammering me. So this is going to be interesting. Zuckerberg said the country would move from being a social network where they broadcast the information, again, where it's a service that is modeled after a living room where people communicate with smaller, trusted groups. Oh my goodness. I'm really glad I am forcibly restrained from commenting and joining in on all these arguments. I'll tell you right now, Jeff, it's been a couple weeks and I'm just noticing the change in my mental state, the lack of stress and having to address attacks and arguments on things that you post. Kind of enjoying it.
Yeah. So, see, I've changed my approach to Facebook. I do still comment on things, but I don't think I have in a few weeks gotten. So when I make the comment, someone will comment, and then I'll go back and comment some more. I pretty much stay out of the comments after that. That way, I'm not getting into these long conversations. I put what is the truth out there. Put case in point. Again, I posted that section of the Patrick Henry speech that I read yesterday in a post. And I'll put the truth out there. The way that it was presented by the framers, people back in the framing era. And I just leave it at that. If they want to listen to what Patrick Henry said, that's fine. If not, if they want to believe that the Federalists were telling us the truth and somehow we just failed the Constitution, well, then fine on you. I mean, just keep going that way, and the Marxists are going to continue to win. If you want to find out that it was flawed from the beginning, because that's exactly what Henry and Mason and Governor Clinton and Robert Yates and on and on and on the list of so-called anti-federalists. And I want to address that real quick because I put this in here too. They were the Federalists. Yes. This was a media smear tactic used. So, hey, look, the media's did the same thing back then that it does today. It lied about the opposition. It painted them as people that were against federalism, when in fact, Henry was one of the biggest Federalists of that day. So anyway, enough of that. We talked about that yesterday. Don't need to get back into that.
The people that they referred to as the Federalists were really the nationalists. And again, that use of the term anti-federalist kind of paints these people as anti-constitutionalists. I want to give a shout out to our very good friend and supporter, Andrew Avery, and I am using his last name because this is posted publicly anyway. But here's what he had to say about our show. And Jeff, the fact that you and Junk Bond and I are all personal friends, we know each other in our personal lives, and I love the camaraderie we have. And this is why we do this show. We know that we are really in an uphill battle, not only with the tech giants, but the indoctrination. But still, we just keep marching forward, trying to educate people on what the proper role of government and the framework of this government was intended to be. We're not very popular, but we are gaining some ground. I'm pleased with the results you've shared with me and seeing the network and our new followers to SoundCloud. So I want to welcome those people. But here's what he had to say. The best government and emergency preparedness show on the internet. It may shock you because it comes from a federalist point of view, and 99% of us are trained to be nationalist. Listen a few times, even if it makes you mad. Federalism makes perfect sense. At least the framers thought so. So people are, I so appreciate those comments. So thank you very much. Andrew. I think, Jeff, I want to start a little bit today. We talked yesterday, and I want to make sure that we get the facts clear. You know, when there are 3 or 4 of us on the air, we kind of get excited and start maybe rushing through things and talking over one another. But I shared a story yesterday that a girlfriend of mine in Park City informed me about something that happened to her. And if you missed the show, I'm not going to get into all the details, but it was yesterday's show, March 6th. But she was in a parking lot waiting for a spot for about 3 to 4 minutes. Why somebody would do that, I don't know. There are so many you can choose from. But anyway, she was waiting, and right when the car pulled out and left, another car pulled right in and took her spot. You can imagine that. So she was watching the driver, I guess, as her daughter was getting out of the vehicle. I want to be very clear at this point, and this is where I failed to get the facts out accurately or clearly, I should say. It's one of those things, Jeff. Don't listen to what I say. You have to understand what I'm thinking. When are you going to get that? But she was out of her vehicle and in a vulnerable position. And when the man got out, he accosted her, asked in very unchivalrous terms what she was looking at. Paint your own picture there. And she said, "Well, sir, we had been waiting for this spot for quite some time, and then you just pulled right in. Maybe you didn't realize that." Now, had that been me, and I realized I had done that, I would have said, "I'm so sorry if they weren't parked. I will move and you can take the spot." Or, "Hey, I see you got a spot. When we all go into the store, how about I buy you a cup of coffee? I'm really sorry about what I did. That was rude." But again, I think this guy knew what he was doing, and he wasn't going to do anything like that, especially given his subsequent behavior. That being said, he had accosted her, cussed her out, walked away, then turned around and came back and started yelling at her, calling her some very vile names. And then she put her hand into her face and she said, "He got this close to me," meaning he was cussing her out. At that point, I had said, "You need to get some training." This is what I told her. "You need to get some training and keep somebody from getting that close to you." At that point, whether or not you are injured or assaulted is completely up to them and not you, because it's obvious you don't have training or you wouldn't let them get that close. So you're not going to know how to thwart an imminent attack. I had indicated to her, and I said this yesterday on the air, if I saw somebody who had already exhibited hostile behavior all of a sudden turn around and come running at me quickly, calling me these names, I would have drawn my firearm. I want to make sure you understand, I would not ever draw a firearm unless the circumstances indicated I was under an immediate, imminent fear of serious bodily injury or death. You don't know what somebody with this mental state of mind is going to do. Hopefully they would see, because if I'm open and I open carry, that will dissuade. In fact, it has. I was confronted by somebody once in Salt Lake City over a traffic incident. He was very hostile until he saw that I was open carrying. I didn't brandish. I didn't point to my gun. I didn't do anything. There are obviously, different thoughts on whether or not open carrying is optimal. We're not going to discuss that right now. I do it for legal reasons out here in Utah, and my decision not to apply for a concealed carry permit. We don't have what they call, and I don't call it, but what people refer to as constitutional carry out here. So, Jeff, I just wanted to make sure people were very clear. When we were having this conversation yesterday, I was thinking about a gal on a very popular libertarian site who goes around and challenges people. For instance, at these anti-Trump rallies, some of the Antifa people, and when they start getting hostile to her, it's obvious she's not carrying a firearm. Her clothes are painted on. There's no gun on her anywhere. And if there is, she's not going to be able to get it quickly. But she goes up to these people very close, and when they get hostile, she says, "I carry, right?" Jeff, can you tell me any tactical or logical benefit to that behavior?
None whatsoever.
I guess it gets good followership, for your website. But other than that, please do not do that. So again, the difference and why I think it's so important for women, especially, to have training, particularly in firearms. And if you don't like guns, some sort of self-defense training. I told you about my friend out here yesterday, Dave Parinelli, in progressive defense tactics out here in Park City. We're going to have him on But, when you are trained in personal protection, firearms, you're of this mindset that you're not going to put yourself out and get into a conflict, a possible conflict over something like a parking lot, because we are all aware of the fact that these things can escalate and escalate quickly. Jeff, when I was practicing criminal defense in California, I had to represent some people in some road rage incidents where, just getting involved in a dispute while you're in your vehicle, where somebody went after someone with a knife. The police went to that person's home, found the knife. So this stuff is serious. There are a lot of really unhinged folks out there. And what do they say? An armed society is a polite society, not because people are going to be polite to you because you may or may not be carrying, but because people that are armed and trained in arms, proficient with them, are going to be very judicious in their interaction with people. I had somebody tell me once in California, a family member, I will not say who, says, I really don't like open carry where everybody can carry. I don't want to get shot if I accidentally cut in line at Starbucks or bump into somebody. My response was, please tell me at one point in time in history has a lawful gun owner ever opened fire in Starbucks over getting in line. This is absolute dogma. This is the leftist drivel, and people that are otherwise intelligent buy into this. And I don't understand why they do that. But there's an article here about women who are becoming, yeah, go ahead.
We talked about this last night, and I just want to get this in because this is important in this whole discussion with this this lady. And if you, we were discussing last night that if you do draw your firearm, okay, this was a situation where there was two people in the car. The person drawing the firearm immediately has to tell the friend with them, call 911. Yes. This all needs to start being recorded immediately. And then as soon as you're connected to 911, it needs to be on speaker so that the operator can hear you clearly stating, stay back, stay away, get away from me, stop threatening me. Whatever it is, you got to make it clear that you're feeling the threat. And that is why you drew your firearm, because the second you draw that, you are now under investigation by the police. It doesn't matter that it is justified. They're going to investigate you for, at the very least, brandishing, and it could be for assault and battery. So you have to get this on record immediately, because the second he calls, you are now the aggressor.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you so much, because I forgot about that. We talked about this last night. We were going to raise this issue. Another thing we were taught also when I was teaching the personal protection inside the home class was, if there's somebody in your home and they are there, again, you don't want to seek them out and get in a gunfight unless you know that your family member or, yourself are under threat. What we had taught people was, look, you get yourself in a safe position and you get on the phone, you get that speaker phone up there and you let dispatch know, I am in a defensive position. And then they can hear a recording. Do not come in this door. I am armed. I will shoot you. So, you want to lay out an evidentiary record that will help to exonerate you in the event that you have to do this. And this is also what I told my friend. You should have made a lot of noise as he turned around, put your hands in a defensive position up in the air, where you not up in the air like you're surrendering, but at your chest level, so you can protect yourself and say, that is close enough. Do not approach me further. And then at some point, the person that's with you has to evaluate the level of the threat, because you might have to get involved and not just get on your phone. If you can do both, that's fine. But we'll talk about a lot more of that. And thank you for reminding me. But this article here is, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but they're talking about how women are getting involved in all aspects of firearms, not just personal protection, but hunting and sportsman competitions. So this was encouraging. And shooting is extremely empowering. The women say it's a good feeling to say, I know I can protect myself if I have to. And I could share a little personal experience about that, because when I lived in Palo Alto, we were in a 2-level townhome, and there were multiple units surrounding us, and one of them had a patio. It was a common area where you could just jump down into our back, I guess, little patio. The walls were about 20 feet high, so it was going to be very discouraging for somebody to try and just jump down there, obviously. Excuse me. But not knowing any better at the time, because we didn't have this mindset, we put up, I was married at the time, a little storage shed against that wall. So now somebody had a much shorter drop onto this container and then could drop down into our patio and enter our home. I was in bed on the top floor. Again, there was no other way out other than the window and the stairs. And I heard this loud crash, like it sounded like somebody jumped on that storage container. It just sounded like 2 feet jumping on this metallic container. And I remember the absolute terror in my heart was just beating. It was almost like you could see it coming out of my chest. I had nowhere to go. If that person, I'm trying to remember, gosh, was our sliding glass door locked? Are they in the house right now? If they are, my only means of escape, unless I surrender to them, and we talked about surrender is never an option, I will have to jump out of the second story window. They never came in, nothing happened. And I don't know if anybody was ever on there or not, but I will never forget how frightened I was. Fast forward to becoming versed in arms and defense and having firearms. When we had moved to an agricultural area, I heard my gate slam on the side of the house. Turned out it was just the wind, but none of that adrenaline, none of that fear came through. Not because I felt I was invincible, nobody is, but I felt I wasn't going to just have my well-being determined by somebody else. I had an opportunity. So this is why it's really, really important for especially women to get involved and understand firearms, because this is not politically correct, but statistically we are the physically weaker sex. So I encourage women to get involved. Anybody that's involved in my area, that lives in my area, I am happy to provide some basic instruction. I'm actually doing that with a girlfriend right now. She's taking some classes locally and I'm helping guide her journey onto there. That being said, we have a lot of issues with regards to firearms. We have Hawaii is actually trying to ban them. We're going to do a little compare and contrast here between Hawaii and Texas. I have an article here from Red State that talks about Hawaii signs a resolution to repeal the Second Amendment. Well, Jeff, we've talked about that before. Repeal the Second Amendment all you want. The Constitution was ratified. Here's a wake-up call before we even had the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was promised as a condition for those states agreeing to ratify, to instill confidence in the good intentions of the general government. So all the Second Amendment does is reiterate the fact that this was never a power or an area subject to regulation by the general government. It is not listed in Article 1, Section 8, other than to arm the militia. That's it. That being said, and this is again our problem, why we have such an uphill battle, even the journalists, even the politicians do not understand federalism. So here's an article written by Right Winger, W-R-I-T-E, Winger, for Red State, and they're talking about 5 more names can be added to the list of nobodies who want to take your guns. The Senate of Hawaii just passed a resolution asking the United States Congress to repeal the Second Amendment or to amend it by clarifying that the right to bear arms is a collective right instead of an individual right, as the Supreme Court decided in Heller. Now, you can go straight to SuzanneCSherman.com, click on Suzanne's articles, and you will see an article there linked. It will take you straight to the publication, the 10th Amendment Center, where I analyze Heller, and we explain how the right to keep and bear arms is not a constitutional right. Yes, it says so in Heller, but Scalia got it wrong. Read the article. We've discussed it over and over again. The Second Amendment is merely a restriction against the general government, meaning the feds, those clowns in Washington, D.C., from regulating firearms. And
Suzanne,
yeah.
I have to come in here real quick because I just looked it up because this is what the producer does for you because he likes helping you out. The Hawaiian Constitution, ready for this? Article 117. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Article 117, Hawaiian Constitution.
So this is the problem. Now,
it was word for word the Second Amendment.
This is the problem. Politicians don't even understand that they have their own state constitutions. California, I think, and New York's constitutions are silent on firearms, meaning if they want to ban them, they can, and don't go screaming that it's a violation of the Second Amendment. What people will then do is say, well, it's a violation of the Constitution, and they assume that there is only one Constitution. We have 51 of them. We have constitutions in the 50 states, and we have the Holy Parchment from 1787, ratified in 1789. So again, people seem to forget. So prior to Heller, some courts of appeal upheld state and local gun control laws that created a total ban on the mere possession of firearms on the premise that the Second Amendment did not protect an individual right to keep and bear arms, that it instead protected a state's right. Here's the problem. They screwed it up here again. Heller had nothing to do with incorporation. That was the McDonald case. So, and thank you, NRA, for taking away states' powers to regulate firearms at the expense of at the benefit of the feds. Thank you very much. In effect, the right to bear arms is nothing more than a collective right of the state. Oh, it says if the right to bear arms is nothing more than a collective right of the state, then the state government gets to decide what it will allow you to be armed with, or if it will be see, here's the thing. This has nothing to do with whether or not it is a collective right. This is a 10th Amendment issue. It's a natural right. The state government does get to decide pursuant to their constitution. So pursuant to the Hawaii Constitution, they have no right to regulate firearms. And here is where this author completely screws it up. At least they're attempting to do this the constitutional way, and they likely will not be successful, but they're no longer attempting to hide their intentions anymore. Agreed with that last clause. They're not trying to hide their intentions. But this is not the constitutional way, either from the federal constitution or their state constitution. Again, if you want to modify the constitution, states can propose it, Congress can propose it, but you need a certain number of states to propose a ratification amendment convention pursuant to Article 5, and then 3/4 of the states must ratify this proposed amendment. This author doesn't even get it right at all on any level. And I mean, they screwed it up from start to finish. And this is what conservatives rely upon. Let's go to a trusted source. We're going to play compare and contrast, not just with news sources, media outlets, but we're going to compare Texas. And now we're going to get into the 10th Amendment Center. Again, I wholly support the 10th Amendment Center. They get it right pretty much every time. Here's a Texas bill that would set a foundation to create a gun rights sanctuary state. So this is statewide. We have some sheriffs saying we're going to have gun sanctuary cities. I'm not going to get into that right now. I don't have time. But here in Austin, this was written by just the other day, a bill filed in Texas Senate would set the foundation to nullify federal gun control in practice and effect. And what they're saying is this bill would prohibit any state government agency, personnel, or public funds from enforcing any federal gun control law if the federal statute, order, rule, or regulation or international law imposes a prohibition, restriction, or other regulations such as capacity, size, configuration, and limitation that does not exist under the laws of this state. the state agencies and local governments. This is called commandeering, anti-commandeering clause, by the way. And actually Connor Boyack discussed this, that's part of Proposition 2 out here in Utah, that state resources will not be allowed to be used to enforce federal marijuana laws. What I submit to you is they need to go even further. And yes, this is going to be stirring up the pot, but the states not only should say we are not going to participate in these programs, but we will stop, we will interpose when federal agents seek to violate the Constitution when it comes to an area never delegated to them by the states, and when it seeks to violate our state constitutions with regards to firearms. Again, we are supposed to have 50 different sets of state firearms laws. There was never supposed to be any firearms laws. This is a 10th Amendment issue. So that is what we call federalism, folks. What they say here is the federal government relies heavily on state cooperation to implement and enforce almost all of its laws. So compare this now to the marijuana movement. We have 33 states and Washington, D.C., who have, in effect, nullified federal marijuana laws. The feds look the other way because we can keep this traffic going. And hey, what if somebody's driving from one state to another? So they take the weed that's legal in one state and bring it to another. Hey, guess what? Now they're going to work with the states. And they continue to make money with civil asset forfeiture. We just had this out here in Utah. Yes, the Utah Gun Exchange owner, he was arrested, civil asset forfeiture. He had some marijuana. Therefore, he had his money, his guns, his silver, all part of the crime syndicate here. This is why the feds kind of turn their eye when it comes to states nullifying their law and federal marijuana laws, because they can still profit from it. You have anything to say about that, Jeff?
No, I think you hit it all. Again, there's all but 3 states that have their own form of a Second Amendment in them. Pennsylvania's is fantastic. I mean, it even goes to say that the right to keep arms shall not be questioned. I mean, it goes even beyond the one that Hawaii has, which is exactly word for word the Second Amendment. So even if it went away, the state 47 states have protection in their constitutions. Now, the question is, do they obey their constitution? No, they do exactly the same thing the federal government does. So
that was my next question. I was going to say, so I'm assuming here Pennsylvania has absolutely zero firearms laws, but I would.
Yeah, right.
That I would be incorrect. So, and California is silent on it. So when people complain about California's firearms laws, you need to amend the Constitution of the state of California. Stop running to the federal judiciary. So we have some other areas I wanted to talk about that also illustrate our concept of federalism and why this is so important. Here's an article from the Foundation for Economic Education, and this has to do with vaccinations. As we know, vaccinations are that's a hot topic. I'm not going to get into whether or not people should be vaccinating their children, whether or not they should be getting flu shots. What I am against, and you know what, Jeff, do you have that article handy with Rand Paul? He's a doctor. He is a doctor who does not agree with compelled vaccinations. This is a man who is getting excoriated by so-called conservatives and constitutionalists, not only for his take on mandatory vaccinations, but also for his constitutionally correct interpretation of Donald Trump's emergency powers vis-a-vis a wall. I was on K-Talk Media the other day, and the callers, supposedly all screeching for the Constitution, were again raking this guy over the coals because saying he should just join the Democrat Party. That's the problem when you examine current events from a constitutionalist, correct originalist perspective. Again, when I say correct originalist perspective, Antonin Scalia, the sacred saint of conservatism, got the Second Amendment wrong. He looked at the plain text and still got it wrong. and shows how the plain text analysis will lead you the wrong way. So when you say these things, you're considered, all of a sudden, you're a Democrat. So here's a case here. The feds are forcing healthcare workers to get flu shots they don't need. Again, this is from FEE, and it's by Bradley J. Vargo, and this was out, let's see, March 6th. There's a difference between obstructing and destroying freedom and can be easily, or the difference between the two can be easily concealed. The CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control. Jeff, can you please find disease control under Article 1, Section 8 while I go through this article? Because if you find it there, that's going to really change my analysis, but I have a feeling I'm on the right path. Anyway, so the CDC recommends everyone 6 months of age and older get a yearly flu shot. That's a lot of shots. Apparently, all we really need is air, water, food, shelter, and a lifetime of yearly flu shots to be happy and protect our national economy. I'm sure there are some significant economic considerations in this. In fact, I'll tell you something, Jeff. When my first son was born, I asked the doctor, the pediatrician, before he was born, when I was interviewing doctors, what are your thoughts on vaccinations? And he said, well, I think the benefits are worth the risks. Of course, they say that. And then I asked, well, what about chickenpox? Because I had chickenpox when I was 6 years old. And I missed a couple of days of school, and now I have lifetime immunity. And I'm going to hear people say, yeah, but now you need the shingles shot. No, ain't happening. But anyway, I said I was fine. I will tell you what his response was. Billions of dollars are lost annually when parents have to stay home and take care of their sick children. They miss work, and corporations are losing money. Heaven forbid we have a parent staying home. I don't care if it's mom or dad. I will never, ever admit that one parent or both parents should be in the workforce. This is part of the planks of communism. This is Agenda 21 to destroy family traditions by getting both parents in the workplace and turning these kids over to the state and then putting the compulsory education. So this wasn't a matter of health. This was an economic consideration. Recommendations are one thing, returning to the article, but medical facilities mandating flu shots for healthcare workers to comply with federal programs is unconstitutional, and singled out exemptions further violate equal protection under the law. Our good friend Rick Barrett says when he was getting his degree in Homeland Security, one of his instructors was saying, this is what we call the new federalism, and this is how we get around constitutional restrictions. We have grants. Grants and federal mandates have been the death knell of our federal system here. Again, not our national system, but the federal system that was designed and ratified in the government to which the states consented. Within our healthcare, and I love this term, I hadn't heard this before, the healthcare industrial complex. So what the military industrial complex is abroad and at home vis-a-vis our national debt, we have the healthcare industrial complex tightening the screws on our freedom here, on our own continental landmass. Diverse professionals have been covertly homogenized into, quote, providers, and are increasingly being mandated with the threat of expulsion or its equivalent to roll up our sleeves, drop our drawers, get the flu shot. I've only had one in my arm. By the way, I haven't had one in over 20 years. If we decline, we'll be punished. Any back talk and we will be outcast or maybe even fired or suspended if you work or practice in Lake County, Ohio, where substituting more effective and alternative measures of patient protection have been unjustly prohibited. Since 2015, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that's the CMS, has put medical facilities on notice. If your staff, excuse me, doesn't get flu shots, we will cut payments for services. What did I just say? New federalism, grants, show me the money. Yet, as we look at the evidence, there are good reasons to challenge carte blanche flu shots. Now, they get into the efficacy of the flu shots. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm really focusing here, excuse me, on the constitutionality of government mandated flu shots. There's a precedent for some employees to comply with the CDC recommendations, but only by contract. Non-at-will employees have a conscientious right of refusal. Now, this is in California. When I was living in California, you could have a conscientious waiver to vaccinations. It did not have to be simply for a medical reason. It could be for philosophical in general, not just religious. That was actually repealed. And now in California, vaccinations are mandatory. You know who the moving force was behind that change in the law? A pediatrician. Who pays their bills? Oh, I don't know. Vaccine manufacturers. I think, the problem is we have politicians that have a conflict of interest creating these laws. That's why laws need to be as few as possible. Government should be limited to essentially protecting our life and our liberty. Pretty much it. Not our safety. We're going to get into that. We'll follow up with that discussion in a moment. So what they say here is forced flu shots repress freedom. Flu shot mandates are just the tip of the repressive needle that will be pushed deeper into our personal freedoms if we allow this to happen. How long will it take for a healthcare worker to mandate to find traction for all employed private citizens? I've been saying this, Jeff. I have people that are state employees, either at universities, but they have to go and have an annual physical exam. I haven't had one in years. Yeah, maybe I should, but it's my decision whether I want to or not. I would hate to be compelled by my employer so I can pay my bills, feed my kids, to go and have a doctor look at me wherever and annually because I have to. Where are they going to draw the line? I had said when the government takes over healthcare, look for restrictions. When I was applying after I lost, thank you, ACA, when I lost my private insurance and I was seeking more, one of the questions they asked so I could get insurance is anybody in your family involved in motorsports? What? I couldn't get insurance because one of the reasons I needed is my older son is a professional race car driver and a mechanic. Yes, he's involved in motorsports. And if I don't disclose that and he gets injured, I'm going to be liable for insurance fraud and I won't get his benefits if he's injured. This is really scary. Where are they going to draw the line? Can't drive a motorcycle? Can't go hunting? Can't own guns? Don't even think of riding a horse. Where do you draw the line here? When we surrender, going back to the article, to agendas bathed in good intentions while ceding our liberty, we become our creations. And in the process of being stewards of health and well-being to private citizens, we destroy ourselves. It's a cliche to say that freedom isn't free, but rather a duty to preserve our liberty by exercising it and infectiously inspiring others to do the same. Sharing your freedom begets your freedom. We can all spread freedom without spreading disease. What a great article. Let's see. Are you there, Jeff?
Oh, I am here. And it looks as though maybe
yeah. We have Ben McClintock joining us, and I think he's listening. Ben, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. I've had him on before. This is my very good friend, local hero out here in Utah, Ben McClintock from Defending Utah. Ben, have you been hearing my discussion on vaccinations?
I haven't had a chance to. I just got on.
Okay, well, I know that you can get right up to speed. I know that we're running short on time, but there's a quick bill here also I'm going to get into. The FDA, I was talking about federally compelled vaccinations and federalism here. As we know, there is absolutely no constitutional authority to impose this. I'm not going to get into this article because now that you're on, we're going to get on to other things. But here quickly, FDA boss to the states says to eliminate vaccine exemptions or else unable to convince Americans like my friend Ben and myself here to fully trust vaccines with endless marketing propaganda and even government mandates. The FDA boss, Scott Gottlieb, I don't know if he's stepped down since this article came out, is now threatening to use federal force. This is what we talk about. We talk about federal coercion to subvert federalism. I think you've had some issues with forced vaccinations. Have you not, Ben?
Well, just with the issues with my daughter being in the hospital, they always, thumb your nose at you and make you look like you're inferior. But never had anything besides pressure and that kind of stuff. Never action.
Yeah, when my second son was born, he was born prematurely, and I postponed his vaccinations. I was troubled with putting, these kind of shots into a 4-pound premature baby. And even though they wanted to, they had absolutely no concern whatsoever with putting those into a 4-pound human being. And I said, no, we're going to wait. And I waited till he was 2. My kids were not in daycare. They weren't in the school system. But even if I chosen not to do it at all at the time in California, that was an option for me, but that's not. And what we see oftentimes in California spreads that, rust of tyranny across this continental landmass. But Ben, let's talk about something out here in Utah with regards to thought crime. Is it HB 8? Where do we see that?
So there's two. There's HJR 8, which changes the rules of how a prosecutor can discover if you believe if what you did to somebody was out of hate. And it says that the prosecutor can use your memberships and associations in determining whether you committed a hate crime. And
wow.
then yeah.
And how do they find this information?
Of course, through investigation. Maybe they access membership records or look through your social media. I would imagine traditional investigative modes.
And here's the thing. You and I were talking about this on the phone because this really does equate to thought crime. And what's interesting to me, because I used to practice criminal defense, is they can go into, so let's say, for instance, we were talking about self-defense and at the beginning of the show. And yesterday on the air, I had shared an experience where a gentleman of color who was very, very showing some violent tendencies. He was obviously having some mental issues, approached our vehicle, and my son was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and he was getting very close. He'd already accosted a young lady on the road. He didn't hurt her, so I did keep that in mind. But he started making his way, waving our arms. I could see his waist. His shirt was open. I did take my firearm out of its holster, and I never brandished it. It was never visible to him. It never escalated, and we were able to drive and get away before it escalated further. But let's say I did have to use this in self-defense. Now, obviously, they're going to investigate this case. Maybe some overzealous prosecutor, social justice warrior who also happens to hate guns, might look in my social media account, my Facebook. My stuff is public because I do this radio stuff. And a year ago, I spoke at an education conference for Sons of Confederate Veterans. And there's a picture of the 4 of us speakers, and the gentleman that put it on, our good friend Carl Jones. And you can see their emblem there, which has the hated Confederate flag, the Virginia battle flag, as it really is called. Isn't it possible that they could see that and somehow impute to me something I never felt and something that never would have motivated me?
Absolutely. That's the whole point of it, is to be able to find different strings to be able to make their accusations fit the narrative. And so, and with in conjunction with that is their bill. So these are kind of two bills together. There's SJR 8, which is the rules in investigating hate crime, and then SB 103, which is the thought crimes bill itself. And it includes so many different, like matriculation. So if a Utah, a fan of the Utes burns a BYU flag, it's not just a case of vandalism, it's now a hate crime. And the sponsor, who's a Republican, has used the radical homosexual lobby's language of calling it terrorism. And so not only is this going to be escalating of the, just a minor I wouldn't even call it minor. It's a severe escalation of the charges, but it's more than just that. It's now they're looking at making it into a federal issue when they equate it with terrorism.
Exactly. When we take one person and put their life as having a value over another. So if someone like you or I were murdered by a person of color or a person who might be of the homosexual persuasion, were killed by somebody like that, that's murder, pure and simple, whatever they're going to charge.
It's illegal. Right.
It's already illegal. However, if somebody kills an individual who is, again, of a certain protected class, there's going to be another crime that's going to be put on top of that, and it's going to be considered a hate crime or a terrorist act. How do you reconcile that with principles of due process and equal protection, which say people similarly situated must be treated the same? I mean, overall, aren't the three groups of people we have been discussing here of equal value to society? Is that such a crazy, I mean, is it hateful to say that we are equal? How do they demand equality and then seek to elevate others at the same time?
That's because the equality jargon is simply a ruse. It's about supremacy. And that's exactly what this bill does, is it creates not just special classes of people, superior classes of people. It is saying your life and your property are more valuable simply because you're within these groups. If you are not within these groups, your life is less valuable. You are not, which makes, some animals are more equal than others. They are superior to the rest of us.
This is what I have been saying about the gay movement, the gay pride movement. I personally, homosexuals, do what you want. I think the government should be out of marriage. I don't get into that argument about gay marriage. What I do have an issue, again, when we talk about equality, I bring up many issues where our liberties are taken away from us. It's always under the auspices of something that should make us feel good about ourselves, like promoting equality. I think Tom Woods referred to equality as the deadliest idea ever to hit society. So we have this equality, but what we have really is superiority under the guise of equality. We have the homosexual couple going up to the baker. We see this all the time, and they are not allowed to refuse service to these people. But we see it's perfectly okay to refuse service to people wearing, a MAGA hat. It's okay to assault these people. It's okay to have certain people given preferential treatment for placement for jobs and quotas, educational, business opportunities. When Chuck Schumer, and I think it was Bernie Sanders, we're talking about decriminalizing marijuana at a federal level, I thought, finally, a semblance of reason, but they can't leave it alone. We're going to make it easier for women and minorities to open marijuana distribution. They just can't help themselves. I want to talk for a minute about marriage, because we have a couple in Utah that is seeking to have their marriage held valid in this state. They're actually first cousins. Are you familiar?
I read about that. Yes.
Yeah. So they're first cousins. What are your thoughts on I think this is quintessential federalism. If Colorado wants to allow first cousins to marry, they can, but that does not mean that Utah is forced to honor that. That flies straight in the face of Obergefell, does it not? Why do we carve out, again, an exemption and make gay marriages mandated that they must be honored in every state across this continental landmass? But what about others?
Well, it's very contradictory. Like you said earlier, I think marriage is a religious institution, and I'm against government involved in marriage as much as I'm against government being involved in baptism. But if they are going to force a state to recognize one marriage, shouldn't they do the same thing across the board? Or shouldn't they just leave it up to the states themselves, like the 10th Amendment says?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because there's no constitutional authority for this. But when we have people in power like the Black-robed messiahs who have very strong ideological policy preferences, we have never seen them back away from their opportunity to impose their will upon 320 plus million people. This is not what the war for independence was fought over. We were fought this over to get away from a system of parliamentary sovereignty, where we had a strong nationalized or central government that could pretty much do what they want. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anything else that we have?
Ben, you're going to need to mute your mic when you're not speaking, because we're getting air movement over your phone.
So
gotcha. Okay.
Ben cannot mute right now because we need him to comment.
So sorry, go ahead and repeat your question, Suzanne.
Well, I was just saying, how is this really a system of federalism, and what else should we do in Utah with regards to, do you think there's going to be a law that's going to change marriage, and what role do you think the government should have? And, where do we have public health, public safety? We know there's some genetic issues with, marrying close relatives. What do you think is the proper role of government in determining this? Where do we cross the line from government policy to private choices?
Unfortunately, the state legislature is obedient to absolute worship of the courts, and so they will basically just do whatever the courts tell them to do on this issue. That's a complicated one on the state level. On this particular one, I haven't thought enough about it to be able to give an answer. I'm still looking into this specific instance. Again, I would fall back onto, I would support just getting the government out of marriage altogether, and then going from there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, here's something else that's kind of interesting. Now, this isn't Utah centric, but I was having a debate with Paul Jensen on his morning show. I don't know if you heard it on Tuesday, but Paul was of the opinion that we need the government to keep us safe, and this was with regards to the border wall. But my statement to him was, it's the proper role of government to defend our liberties. At some point, if you consider it's their obligation to keep us safe, liberty will suffer, because he said, if we're not safe, we don't have liberty. Let me just throw at you, this was a case in Florida, but this is coming here. We've got all the texting and driving laws. Some Florida lawmakers want to limit distracted driving on the road, and it includes more than just texting and eating. You're not allowed to pet your dog if you're driving in the car. Obviously, we know canines in the vehicle can be a distraction. I remember a while back, Stephen King was involved in a very serious accident. I don't know if somebody died or not, because his Rottweiler was in the car. Where do you draw the line? I know, here's one. How about no kids allowed in your car? That's the biggest distraction in the world. Ben, do you see this coming to Utah?
Absolutely. Well, it already is in Utah. The legislature is all about being your big brother and making sure that they are the nanny to protect you from yourself. And the line really needs to get back. If you have not taken away the life, liberty, and property of someone else, the government cannot take away your life, liberty, or property. It seems very basic and elementary, but somehow the people in government have forgotten that basic fundamental thing. Because if we're, like you said, children are a distraction, eating in the car is a distraction. Where does it stop if we give to oppose them any further?
Yeah, exactly. Where do we draw the line? Are you allowed to touch your radio button? Are you allowed to, let's say they pull you over because the dog's near where you can touch it. In Oregon, they passed a law, you cannot have your cell phone where you can even reach it on the other side of the seat. Okay, you're not allowed to eat. What if you need a drink of water when you're driving? What if you're coughing and you need a sip of water? Where do you draw the line? I submit to you, this is about revenue generation This is not about safety. Ben, really quick, we're running out of time. How can people follow and support Defending Utah?
Yes, so we've got go to defendingutah.org and make sure and subscribe to our email alerts, become a member of Defending Utah. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our Facebook page for all of our updates.
Thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to have you here. I'm Suzanne Sherman on behalf of Jeff Johnson and the rest of us over here at the Cerberus Radio Network. I want to thank you for listening. Have a great day.